Hello and welcome to In Conversation. Today we have with us a very special guest from OXFAM India, CEO Mrs. Nisha Agarwal. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much.
Well, I think people in Northeast will not know much about OXFAM, though we understand that you are working for humanitarian crisis in Northeast, especially Assam, and you also work on disaster response. In fact, we have seen in flood how you have worked. So please tell us more about OXFAM and what are the activities you have taken up in Assam.
Actually, OXFAM is a very old organization in India. This year we are celebrating our 60th anniversary. So OXFAM is a global organization, and from the UK it came in 1951 in response to the Bihar famine to come and provide humanitarian assistance. And after that we stayed on in India for 60 years to continue to do humanitarian work as well as development work, long-term development work. But about 4 years ago we transformed ourselves and we are now a completely Indian organization. So in 2008, September 1, OXFAM India was formed, and we are just like, we are a family of 17 independent OXFAMs globally. We come together to coordinate on global issues, but within each country we do our own programming. So the history of OXFAM in India is that we started with humanitarian work, added long-term development work, and now we are a rights-based advocacy organization. So we also use our experience on the ground to talk to the government about better policies and programs that would lead to a more inclusive development path in India. So that's kind of our overall history. When we formed in September, we said, let's take a fresh look at what the needs are in India today. Where should we be working? And we picked 7 states to focus our efforts on, and Assam is one of them. And the others are also all in the north and the east. UP, Uttarakhand, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Orissa, and then Assam.
But Mrs. Agarwal, when you just talk about, humanitarian crisis, is it that in times of crisis only you respond, or it is also that you have some, as you said, advocacy program which you take up with the government, or also that, when you work for equitable society, when you say that justice for everybody, as you said about right to education also.
Yes.
So how have you, categorized Assam, or for that matter the 7 states which you have taken up, only to respond during crisis? Or when there is no crisis also, you go there, you talk to people, and you try to, do capacity building for them.
Yeah. So we work not just in times of crisis. That's one of 4 things we do. That is a big part of us. As we said, we started with that, so it's in our DNA. But then there are 3 other big areas for us. One is essential services. So we look at the right to education, right to health, and right to food as part of that. Then a very big program on gender justice. If you look at any indicator for women today in India, whether it's female feticide, maternal mortality, women lag behind men. So we have a big program on domestic violence for women and also on political empowerment of women. And then the 4th very large area for us is what we call economic justice, which is about livelihoods. So in some of the states, Orissa, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, we look at the rights of tribals. So we work on the Forest Rights Act. We look at mining, whether it's a responsible kind of mining that is happening in India. We look at smallholder agriculture, which is where the bulk of poor people derive their livelihoods from. So these are the 4 big things. Ideally, what we would like to do, and the way we work actually, which is very important, is that we work through local NGOs. So we fund about 200 NGOs that work in these states. They work at the grassroots level to really empower communities who could then demand their own rights from the government. We are just an intermediary, we are a catalyst. But it's really local communities that are being empowered by local organizations, and that's the struggle, if you like, that we support on the ground. Our own job then, you mentioned education, for example. What we say is that all human beings are equal, they are all the same, they all have the same rights. So every child has the right to education. So first what we would have done over the decades is really support movements that say that in our constitution we are providing every child with a right, but then we don't practice it. So many children are still out of school in India, half of them drop out after primary school, so at least till basic education, 8th or 9th, everybody should have it. And many countries that are India's level of development, I have worked in many countries overseas, all the children are in school. So for India to say we can't put all our children in school is really not acceptable at our level of development. So these NGO movements finally got right to education enshrined in a law. So that is the kind of work that we say it's a basic right, it should be judiciable, it should be a legal right. And then we through the NGOs that we are funding on the ground, we look at whether this law is actually translating, because we have wonderful laws in India, but half of them remain on paper, they don't really get implemented, and then some of them which even get implemented will not be implemented for the most marginalized groups. So we work really with the most marginalized groups in India. We work with women, as I said, they're behind men, And then if you look on other dimensions, we work with Dalits, which is again a marginalized group. We work with tribal people, in some of our states, and then we also work with Muslim people. As a community, we feel based on the Sacher Committee report, that they're getting left behind. And all these 4 groups are the ones that we support.
When you decide Assam will be one of a core state for OXFAM to do their work, what were the ingredients you look at it? Like the flood situation was there in the picture?
Right.
Or is it that people are economically backward in many parts of the region? Though Guwahati is a different scene altogether.
Yeah.
But when you travel outside Guwahati, you see that most part of rural Assam is economically backward. So how do you actually said that, yeah, this is Assam and we are picking Assam because this is what we can do to bring about a change for them?
Right. So when we formed in September, we said the first thing we need to do is have our own strategy. Where are the needs today in India? And we said we want to do it very scientifically so that people don't say, why did you pick Assam and why did you not pick Madhya Pradesh or Rajasthan or so many poor states that we still have in India. So we commissioned a paper from Professor Amitabh Kundu, who's a professor at JNU, and he works at poverty issues. And we said, please do a ranking of all the states for us. Look at all the economic data, all the social data, all the governance data, bring all these indicators together and rank all the states in India. And then we said, we would like to do more, but we don't have enough financial capacity to do 8 or 10 states. So let's just take 7. I mean, it could have been 5, it could have been 6. We just took 7 as a number. And in the top 7, Assam was there, and that's why we picked it.
Okay, so what was the indicator for Assam? The poverty?
So the poverty rate, then all the other social indicators. If you look at the Millennium Development Goals, the first indicator is the poverty rate. Then all the indicators on quality education for children, maternal mortality, infant mortality. So these things, and then gender equality, a combination of all these factors. It's hard to come up with one index that captures everything, but basically looking at a very broad range.
Look at the development index of Assam, like in terms of health, education,
all of these, yes, all of these.
So you took into consideration all of that.
Yeah.
So now I think we come back to the main activity which presently you have been working on for the 8 in BTADs in Assam, violence after the violence. You have started your activities there. Also during the floods you have started working for the flood affected victims in Assam. So how has been your experience and how you have been able to work for the people here?
Yeah. So Assam at the moment, the bulk of our focus has been on humanitarian work. We would like to do the whole package of everything, health, education, etc. But as I was saying, once we developed our new strategy, we found that historically the bulk of our resources were tied up in the southern and western states. That's where we had gotten started. 80% of our program was there. We didn't want to move too fast, so we are slowly shutting down that program and we are slowly freeing up resources to put into our 7 focus states. So in the future, we very much hope that we would have a much fuller package program for Assam, including health, education, gender equality and so on. But at the moment, because of limited financial resources, not because of our limited desire to do more here, we are really focusing very much on humanitarian issues. So we developed a strategy for each of the 7 states and we said if we can't do everything, which is what we would like to do, what's the most burning need? And here what we found is that historically over time, what we have responded to is disasters. Each year there are floods and we provide 6 months of relief package and then we leave because it was not a focus state for us in the past. Ideally now we would like to stay and we would like to work on livelihoods and health, education and do the full development package. So we have about 6 or 8 partners here and the bulk of the work they do is what we call disaster risk reduction. So in the time when there's not a disaster happening, basically floods is what we have responded to most. They prepare communities on how to prepare themselves because we know a flood will come sooner or later. So we help the communities to do all kinds of things so that when a flood comes, damage to life and to property is minimal. Teaching them alternative types of crops that they should grow or teaching them about food banks, seed banks, teaching children to swim, teaching people to raise hand pumps, all about safety issues. So that continues throughout the year. And then during the time of floods, for example, we were already here in June when the floods hit, in Moregaon and Sonitpur, in 2 districts. So we are there, we are a specialist agency in water, sanitation and public hygiene. We are one of the second largest humanitarian organizations in the world. Different organizations do different things. OXFAM has specialized over the years in this. So we don't only do water, sanitation and hygiene. Sometimes we do livelihood, sometimes we do shelter as well. But if we have limited resources, the first thing we would do is water and sanitation. So that's what we were doing in Moregaon and Sonitpur. And then the conflict, the tension arose in BDAT. And for us, because it's a focus state, even though we didn't really have much experience as OXFAM India, because we are only 4 years old, we've responded to floods every year, and Ladakh as well, and Orissa, and so on. We were saying, do we need to go in, and do we know how to work in that area? And we said, but it's exactly the same. For us as a humanitarian agency, if there is any reason why, whether it's a natural disaster or it's tensions or conflict that affect people and they don't have access to basic water, sanitation and public hygiene, then it's our duty to be there. So we came in and we are working in Kokrajhar and in Chirang, just 2 districts. And we came in and we are doing exactly the same thing there that we are doing in Moregaon and Sonitpur. We are distributing public health kits. We are training people on hygiene. Then we are distributing some basic shelter materials, tarpaulin and ground sheets. And then we're building toilets and bathing cubicles separately for men and women.
Well, this is a hygienic way of living. Though you are in times of crisis, you don't have a shelter to live in.
Yes.
But whatever accommodation you have been given by the government, the rehabilitation, you have to adjust however what is there with you. So any concrete plans which you have, the government is saying that they will rehabilitate the people there. They have certain political issues also which we cannot discuss right now in this forum. But how, as OXFAM, trying to partner with the government or the local NGOs in saying that everybody will be rehabilitated irrespective of whatever origin they are from, irrespective of whatever issues they have, basically to give them the aid which they need at first.
That's right. So what we saw, because the last 2 or 3 days I've been traveling to that part, and we were both in Kokrajhar and Chirang, I think the immediate needs, it was quite impressive to see actually that people had food, that people had, a doctor was visiting in most places almost, every day or every other day. They had some basic medicines, very basic, but cough and fever and some antibiotics and so on. So while the immediate needs are being met, what people said to us is, look, we just want to get back home. That's our need. Nobody should have to live in camps, however much it might be that you can give them the basic things, etc., but they're just dying to go home. And for that, there were 2 or 3 different things that we saw. In some places, people even, could go back to their villages and they felt secure enough and they still had homes, but they were saying, our crop has been destroyed. If we go back home, we don't get the food. If we stay in the camps, we get food. Now there I would think the government would have a fairly simple solution, which would be to say we are really stocking up the public distribution system, and for the next few months till the next crop comes, let everybody, irrespective of where they are living, have access to basic food. And I think India can afford to do that now. We have stocks of food piling up, we are exporting food. If we were to just move some of that and make it very easily available, you could get people out. The burning need is to get people out of these camps, because this is not a way that anybody wants. They don't want to live like that, and I'm sure the government doesn't want them to live like that. So that's a fairly simple solution.
So you mean to say, like, let them go back, let them be rehabilitated, but without work they stay, and we provide to give them food, the government provides to give them food and shelter or something like that? Or there can be a different mechanism worked out altogether, like they can get back to their work, whatever we're doing, like most of the people which we assess have been into labor works, and of course farmers whose agricultural land have been destroyed.
Yeah. So one I said was food, because some of them actually told us that they're only staying because of food. So that's why I picked that first.
Yes.
I think that's the easiest thing to do.
Yes.
Second, as you say, income. They need income. We saw in Moregaon and other places, NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, had kicked in, and people were getting work. There is plenty of work to be done. So the state can decide actually that, we will put people back to work, and you can relax the rules for a little while, that they can do, instead of just doing public works in agriculture, maybe they can start building the homes and be paid for that. So we have to be a little creative and a little flexible.